Podcasting with Ceri Jones.
Hi guys, and welcome to this week's podcast. This weekend, I'm travelling over to Ireland for a few weeks, so I'll be meeting up with some friends to record my upcoming podcasts. So to get us into the spirit, this episode I've put together excerpts of all the Irish episodes and guests to date, including some funny stories from across the land, from Corrib, Con, Sheelin, Curran, Erne, and plenty of others. While I'm there, you can follow me on my travels around Ireland with updates on my Patreon page. Something which I enjoy at the end of every chat I have with my guests is the question, where would you want to be to make your last cast? And I get asked it so many times, to be honest, when I'm out and about. Well, maybe one day I'll tell you where my last cast is going to be. But I've included one, which is probably my favourite of them all. It's quite a poignant last cast. So when I'm over, if you know anyone who would like to hear as a guest, give us a shout. But in the meantime, pull up a chair and join me for a glass and enjoy. Episode 28, Mark Regan.
Oh, they were the early spring fishermen. My dad used to tell me about those in the Corrib, and they went out in the one-man punts. And they were commercial fishing. The fish were sent from Ouderard by bus or train. There was a train that time, and they were in Billingsgate 2 days later. And they kept, those fishermen. That was their job. And then later in the year, in May and everything, they took out the rich gentry, gillying them. But when they did the spring fishing, Dad was saying they sometimes slept underneath the punts. So you can imagine in February how, we've got all our modern Gore-Tex clothing and everything now. They probably had, oiled cloth, keep them thing. They were in rowing these punts with 3 hazel rods. So they were extraordinarily skillful, keeping the 3 rods going. They took the line in by hand. They had a net to net the fish. And they sometimes slept underneath that punt in a bag of, with a bag of straw, keep them warm. So they were pretty phenomenal. And they knew the lake really, really well. They had to know it. And if they caught a perch or something like that, they would eat it and fight, but they never ate the trout because they were too valuable. Yeah. So as I said, and I believe that the trout from Ballindiff Bay, it's documented that in Billingsgate, you got a bigger price for them because, like what you were saying earlier, they were the really short, deep fat fish, and they were really pink-fleshed. Yeah. And if they could get them from there, sometimes they actually rowed down. Now that's a good row from, Ouderard to Annadown.
They must have had arms like cow's legs.
Oh, they must have been unbelievable men, really, just to manage the boat that day, I suppose they just did it steadily and consistently. And they're small boats, And if there's any kind of a big wave at all, it's like being in a kayak, you really need to know what you're doing. And there's a few people still use them today and just do a little bit of it just to keep the tradition alive.
62, Colin Follen.
And then I brought my man up on top of the falls, and look, there's probably another 40 or 50 fish in the pool below the falls. And he fished for an hour and a half. He started off with your standard size 10s and size 12s, doubles and stuff like that. And then he moved down to smaller flies, flashier, and, fishing 14s and 16s. So he fished for an hour and a half. So not a pull, nothing. The salmon were jumping over his fly line, and the language out of him now, you wouldn't hear it out of a docker, what was coming out of his mouth. Yeah. And after an hour and a half, I says to him, I says, Deccan, they're not going to, he kept saying to me, what fly will I pick next? And, I was telling him, you put this on now, put that on now. And after an hour and a half, he handed me the fly box and he says, what will I put on there? And I says, they're not going to take anything in that box, I said to him. And he looked at me, his jaw dropped, and he says, I fucking bought this box of flies off you, he says to me, you know. So I says, I know, I says, but you're going to have to step outside the box here now. So
69, Julie McKeever.
Story of the Archbishop and the drunken gilly.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole thing was, I'd never been out fishing. I'd never been on the lakes. And I mean, I was busy getting started with, at the hotel and running a hotel. And then one night he said to me after dinner, he, very quiet man over dinner, and he said, I think it'd be a very good idea, Julie, if you came out on the lake to know what your guests are doing. So Julie took off the next day and went into a renowned angling shop in Ballina and got fitted for new big PVC waders, and I must have got a rod and all that as well. So off we went, and he used to employ for the whole month, over the weeks he was there, two particularly well-known gillies. They were brothers. Yeah. But there was one thing that they were well-known for also. They were seldom sober. And, it's something you don't ever happen now, but it was, 30 odd years ago, yeah. But I always think that whoever was in the best part of sobriety on the day went out with the good bishop on the day. So we went out anyway, and I'd say probably after the first or second cast, the fly came straight back and caught me in the knee. I always remember the knee of the waders. And the gilly spent his afternoon on his knees in front of me trying to take out the fly out of my waders. And I can actually still remember the fumes of that stale alcohol space. But the bishop is sitting up there on the bow of the boat with a curly pipe, and he used to wear a tweed cap, the Irish tweed caps always on him. But he always had the collar underneath his jacket, believe it or not, and he giggling away.
64, Mike Corrib. In fact, I was trolling, in the day, and I hooked and lost a good fish. Yeah, so I had no luck, so I went in to get some lunch. And on this particular day, I didn't have any fry-up stuff on my kettle or nothing, so I just had, I think it was just a Mars bar. And I had a flask, mate. I pulled my boat up into an area. It's quite... it's the bay itself on the island is quite shallow, but if you go round the corner, it sort of deepens off. So what I did, I just moored the boat, just pushed the boat up on this slightly steeper area. And so instead of actually getting out onto the shore then, I just wedged the boat up a little bit, and I just sat on the bow, had my coffee, which I had in the flask, and a Mars bar. And I was sitting there just eating my Mars bar. Next thing, right in front of me, probably 10 foot from the engine, I saw a rise. So I watched. I saw another rise. And all of a sudden, I can see there's a little bit of breeze going from left to right. And I just watched. And this is something which I never do. If I'm trolling, I'll never have a fly rod. I'm either trolling or I'm fly fishing. This particular day, I had my fly rod, not set up, just in the bag, in the bow of the boat, just behind me. And on my waistcoat, not only fly gear even, just the waistcoat, where I had a floating line, and there's a couple of flies. And I watched now, and it was like a flotilla of mayfly coming off. And they were all close distance, all along. I was looking at the shore. All these fish were on about 10 yards out, maybe closer in. And I was fumbling now, you can imagine. Because these hatches sometimes are freak incidences. They don't happen very often. And I was watching these fish coming up, taking these fly. And then I thought, right, so I was fumbling now, excited. I actually stepped out of the boat then, not to make too much noise. And then I put the fly rod up. And then I walked up the shore then, about, 30 yards, 40 yards. And the idea was me to cover these fish walking back towards the boat. And it was just one of those right place, right time. And I covered the fish. And nothing happened. Then I cast out again. There was a little dimple. Bang! Into this fish. And he was 7.5 pounds. And he was unreal. On the shore. And it was just, and in fact, I've got a photograph which I put up in the, which you'll see to go with this podcast, and it was beautiful. It was so good, and I actually kept this one for the smoker, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I wanted to give some to a good friend of mine as well. 16, Dennis Cronin. There's lots of lakes and lochs. I've got these old buildings and huts and monasteries. Obviously you got the Corrib and you got Curran, wasn't it? Oh, Curran.
Oh, that's the one. That's right. There's one there on Church Island.
Church Island, yeah.
Out in the middle of the lake, yeah.
We fished that. We fished that a few years ago, didn't we?
We fished that, yes. We had good fun there. I had great fun subsequently, with my big trout.
Oh, what big trout was that?
What was it? I have a lovely big trout there on my Facebook profile.
All right, that's the 10 pounds.
The 10-pound sea trout from Loch Rann.
Wow.
Now, I have to say it has caused some controversy. And
I know what you're going to say.
I've never claimed that I caught it. I just put it up on the photo.
Well, it looks good.
A friend of mine caught it, and I said, would you take a picture with me and the fish? And he said yes, with my camera. And I immediately put it as my Facebook profile. And I got, what you might say, a little bit of abuse subsequently from my good friend John Buckley, who caught the fish.
How did he?
So official now was he caught the fish.
Yeah, and that was from Curran, was it?
Yeah. That was in Curran, yeah.
I thought it was, because I looked at the picture, and it was that area where you get the boats where we set up from. There's like a causeway almost.
You took a picture of those boats, and it's kind of has appeared on numerous occasions since on different.
Yeah, it was a lovely morning.
Yeah, it was a lovely morning. Yeah.
Well, say lovely. It was calm, and then we thought,
it was useless for fishing, but it was a lovely picture.
No, but literally in about come lunchtime, because I was on the boat with John Buckley, and you were with Michael Hennessy.
That's right.
We had a lot of fish that day. Nothing huge, but they were like pound and a half, but we had lots of them, and it just came one of those days where you can't go wrong. And it was great sport.
One of those days, yeah. What we call juniors, right? They come in around June, the smaller fish, and that's the time.
And you know what? We went out, we fished well up the lake. I'm not sure if it was like a storm force 10, and I thought, and even I started to get, wow, this is a little bit too much. Not only are you getting the big troughs and the rollers, you were getting like white tops in the water. It was like a bit of both. I was like, my stomach started to go once or twice, just motoring across the waves. And then it must have been about lunchtime then. Steve was looking at me thinking, I don't think we better fish this. We did not. I think we might have had one or two. One thing I did notice, I've never seen it since, right? I don't know if it's because of the landed terrain around there. There was like a water tornado come up from the lake, right? And it was about 20 foot tall. And it was spinning round, lifting up from the lake. I thought, oh, that's it. And that was a turning point then. But it was quite a sight. I'd never seen anything like it. Yeah,
well, we see that regularly, but we don't go out in the lake when they're there, but they're the water spouts, yeah. You get them because there's two. You have the Black Belly or the Glenare side over one side, coming over the Black Belly, and you have Gappadon Low on the other end of the lake, and I suppose where the winds meet, they spin, and you could see 20 of them sometimes in the day. But you wouldn't be out fishing, you would be just looking from the shoreline. But they're fantastic to see. Yeah, you see them in even in Gugan Barrow, the little lake that I fished there the last day of the season. You'd see them there, small ones, but you'd see them because of the mountains twist the wind. They change the wind direction, and it makes these water spouts. So they're fantastic to see, but dangerous to be out in. I got caught myself one time out in them, but I just waited and sat in the shoreline and had a coffee and waited, and then went when I got a break as fast as I could. Went in. Well, big lakes, you have to be careful, like the West, and Killarney is big enough. Well, Killarney is affected by the mountains, so you just have to be careful. You have to know the weather.
30, John Buckley. And I think it was something I learned early on, that when you're fishing for these small trouts, they're lightning quick, and you get a quick, and you feel the tug, and it's gone. So after a while, you're getting fine-tuned, and you're like in the zone, and you're waiting for any sort of disturbance, the line or tweak or pull, and you strike, and you're getting quite confident, and these fish are coming now and you're doing all right. But every now and again, you're lightning quick. The line goes and you strike, and as you strike then, you'll see like a 5 or 6 pound grilse just swim away, like, and you haven't given enough time, like, And that's why at the end of my podcast, I got a bit of a line that said, don't strike too soon. And that's the reason.
Yeah, but you're 100% right. And I can completely relate to what you're saying. Is because we meet plenty of small fish, and they're lightning quick. You're like you said, you're in the zone. You're ready every cast. You're ready for the fish. The one thing you need when you're fishing for salmon is patience. You got to leave them turned down with that fly. It's salmon will come up and just snap it like a trout will, but the majority of the time they'll give a swirl under it, sip it down, and the hardest thing to do is strike. The hardest thing not to do is strike.
Yeah.
Every instinct you have is telling you to lift the rod. Now there's areas on that lake and all the lakes in Killarney where we will specifically target salmon with the flies because we've been doing that over the years. In different areas, we know we need to slow down. We've hit that certain point to target a salmon. So if a trout comes up, you're kind of switched off, right? You live to fight another day with no interest in you, so you don't really care. So you actually tuned into hitting hooking that salmon. So you do slow down. But it's again, it's like every person I've ever fished out of water and made a salmon. 9 times out of 10, they'll always lose the first.
45, James Barry.
One good fish in the morning. We got up at silly o'clock, 4 a.m. I think, and we headed out. There was actually a funny story behind it. The engine wouldn't start on the boat, so you obviously get down to your boat. You're ready to go. You're looking out on the lake, and we go to pull the engine. No go out of the engine. So I was just annoyed over the top of the boat, and my friend that was with me, Jason, said, "Oh look, I'll just row us over to this bay, and we'll give it a go." And at this stage, I was sitting up top. I was just annoyed, the engine not working.
Yeah.
Ready to go back to the B&B and just say, "That's it, enough of this." But Jason, thankfully, anyway, rowed us over to the little bay, and as we were approaching, we're probably 100 yards out, we could just see. Well, I could see. I was sitting up the top. We could see this fish just sipping behind an island. And I shouted back to Jason, I said, "Yeah, I think I see something here." Yeah. And sure enough, we kind of rowed up onto this island, really nice and stealthy, actually. Now that I look back at it, it probably helped us a bit that the engine didn't start.
Yeah.
And it's just sipping away. And I just set up the fly, waited for the fish to come up. Textbook stuff, just drop the fly beside where he came up. And sure enough, he just came up and had it. And then all hell broke loose. It was just almighty battle. And he was just such a pretty fish.
Wow.
And yeah, definitely one I won't forget in a while. Just great buzz. Just food for the fly fishing soul up there around Mayfly time. It's great fun.
Yeah. Well, it must have been a blessing, really, that the engine didn't work.
That's it, everything, all these things happen for a reason, as they say. Yeah.
Did you get it to work after?
I was messaging Jason saying that all I need is a bit of sunshine on the engine there will heat it up a bit. And sure enough, when the sun came up and hit it, it was fine. One turn of the engine had started, and we headed off then, but we actually didn't catch that for the rest of the morning.
Feel free to visit my online shop on my website, where you will find a selection of my most popular Irish sign prints, plus a choice of ghillie kettles and cooking accessories. Or if you would like to experience one of my guiding and instruction packages, feel free to message me. Or again, take a look at my tuition and guiding page at castingwithkerryjones.com. 66, Jackie Mahan.
I just won't go out, throw something into a pot. I go out, I'll wash it, make sure that grease is off it, and I'll stand there, make sure the colour is right. I think the colours, the Irish colours, there's nothing like it in the whole world. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's basically, I just think the colours are just something. It makes a difference to a fly as well, Terry. A lot of people will be saying to me, "Can I have that dressing for that fly?" Half the time I can't say to them, "Listen, I can't give you the dressing because you won't have it."
No.
And they won't have it.
No.
And that's the one thing with a person dyeing his own materials. It's very hard to explain to people that what I have, even what I dye today, is going to be totally different than what Tony O'Sullivan has in Cork.
Yeah.
Because it's to do with the water as well. My water is more boggy here, so I'm going to get a different colour. I'm going to get a different colour than what Tony has, because he'd be more minerals in his water, if you know what I mean, down in Cork.
Yeah.
Where my water's coming from an actual bog, coming down from the Benbulb and down through the bog. So my water quality will be different than Tony's, and that makes a difference with the dyeing as well. Back to your question, Tony's colours will be different than my colours, if you know what I mean as well.
Yeah.
And, Tony often sends me colours, I often send Tony colours, because the colours are just totally different.
Yeah.
And the work that goes in with a curry is just, but it's worth it. It's worth it. It's absolutely worth it.
I suppose it's meticulous as well. If you want to reproduce a colour, which you had done previously, it's not just a case you got to remember. I guess you got to write everything down, have you?
I have everything written down. I have a book here belonging to my grandfather. I started making my own dyes. There recently, I put a cape, I think, up yesterday of a colour. I want to get more into that. I'm looking to do more of that, to be honest with you, Kerry, for next year. It's just amazing, like the difference between seaweeds, different times of year to go and lift that seaweed after a heavy frost or a storm.
Yeah.
There's just different things. Even magenta, like done with blue bottles, boiling blue bottles to get magenta. It's just different things.
Boil blue bottles?
Actually, blue bottles to get magenta.
Well,
getting a load of blue bottles.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, just to get different colours. Adding even down to roots of some flowers and putting the actual roots in and boiling it to get colours. Yeah. And I definitely want to get more and more into that end of it.
67, Dominic McKerrigan.
I had the heaviest fish, just over 4 pound, I think it was. Got that fish on the qualifying day as well, which was good. I was partnered with John Somerville. I know you mentioned John in one of the other podcasts. I was partnered with John, and Noel Moran was boating, and there was a nice wind on the lake. It was a real nice wind, and I think it was blowing into Cahir. And we went down, and Noel is a lovely wooden boat, a clinker boat, and it does drift. It does drift like a dream. There's no doubt about it. It drifts like a dream.
Yeah.
So we went in, and we were fishing off, not deep water, but fishing off marginally deep water into shallows, and came into a small inlet at Cahir Bay, and I put the fly in. I was pulling away and chatting, and the next thing just came up on the hang, and this lad just came out of the water, and the lovely head and tail over the bob fly. I just took it and let him down. Like the thing about that water was that clear. You could see the fish going down and down at the fly, and just lifted into him. And the fight took off, and I was playing away at him. And of course, then John was fishing the other side of the boat. He was fishing away, and my fish was steaming out the front of the boat here, and John was pulling away. And the next thing, I just looked with the corner of my eye, and of course, there was obviously 2 fish laying in there. The comrade came up and went for John's fly over, big head and tail over it, and missed it. So that was the 2 fish were sitting in there. It must have been a pair of fish.
Wow.
They were hanging about in there. So John fished for a little bit, didn't get it. So fair play, he quit fishing when he seen that I was in a pretty good fish. He quit fishing. Noel got on the oars, but between the 3 of us, we got all done and got him directed round the rocks and into the net. And then that was, I won the heat that day. I can't even remember what the prize was for winning the heat. So then, of course, that carries on then for the heaviest fish for the whole of the competition. That was maybe the Wednesday, was my qualifying day. The Saturday then, it blew up, blew really, really hard. So the qualifying days then were cancelled. Or maybe it was the final was cancelled and it had to be rescheduled. So you were sort of checking every day. and the sweat was on because you were the heaviest fish, and you were phoning, was there anything big got today? Was there anything big got today? But yeah, I came out of that in the end. So I think I had crystal trophy and €1,000 plus whatever the winning of the heat got me. I can't remember that. Yeah, so there's. And look, the thing is, it leaves you can fish competition free for a bit. Then so you can, you're not paying anything. It's profited at that stage, which is good.
Will your wife be listening to this podcast? Because then you tell her £250 you're at.
That's what I told her. I said, that's £250, so she'll be out it in diesel.
42, Neil Darling.
I've got very fond memories of fishing camping trips to Fermanagh with Dad, using the old canvas tent that him and his granddad would have used in their sort of fishing trips.
Brilliant.
And I can remember thinking as a kid it was more akin to a circus tent really than a sort of a tent you'd take camping. It was a huge thing. It had seen better days. It had had a fair few trips to Scotland, I think, with Granny and Grandad as well. So, that was all adventures in its own right. And, the Dad, during a heavy fall of rain one night, decided that Germaline, the sort of bacterial cream, was a great way of stopping the water coming in. And, of course, as soon as he touched the tent and the tent side, it sort of flooded in after that. So, there's memories like that through, and trips to. We used to stay in a place called the Willow Pantry Bed and Breakfast in Enniskillen. One of the lasting memories of that is the Ulster Fry breakfast that you used to get every morning. It was like, I don't know, an English breakfast on steroids. I think you were guaranteed at least sort of 3 types of bread: fried bread, soda bread, and potato bread, and all the usual sausage and egg. And so that set you up for the day's fishing. There was no lunch needed after that.
81, Peter Boyle.
I was fishing a competition on it back a good number of years ago, and I was partnered with this guy, and I had a green Peter on the tail, and I had a bibio on the top dropper, and I was bringing the flies in through. Just you're talking about stories, and I was bringing the fly in through the waves, and next thing this lovely son had come up and he took the bibio on. I knew he wasn't that well hooked, and I played him, and I kind of played him a wee bit harder than I should have. And just as the sun had come to the boat, he started jumping. And so he started jumping, I stuck the net in, and I says, I'll get him into the net. And he just went bananas. He went aerial, and next thing he jumped up in front of me, and I could see the fly going one way and the trout going the other way. And that was it, the trout was gone. And I says, here, I wouldn't even like to say what I said.
Yeah.
Your man in the front of the boat, then he started telling me how I should have done it, And I said, listen, not to worry, it's done, he's gone. And I said, well, get out and get another one. As I pulled the net in here, the fish had swam into the net. I swear to God, it must have been when the trout jumped and he hit the water, he must have went to swim underneath the boat looking for shelter. And when he swam underneath the boat, he swam into the net. And you're talking about the racket I had with that guy in the boat. He was telling me that I wasn't allowed to weigh it in.
Wow.
You can't weigh it in. And I says, here, you just watch me weighing it in. Imagine, what's the chances of that ever happening?
You couldn't make that up, could you?
No, but I'll tell you now. I'll tell you about the one that happened. It happened to me.
78, Keith McDonough. When you actually fish these articulated lures then in Kylemore and other venues where you fish, do you fish off a drifting boat? Do you fish it, or do you anchor? Or do you look for areas? Or how exactly would you fish? You wouldn't fish it like loch style, I suppose, do
you? You can fish it loch style, but the problem is that you want to get down a little bit more than you would with conventional fly, I feel, on the lakes. And I think what works well is to bring the boat nose down in the wind and work along drop-offs. We found those fish on sharp drop-offs hanging on the edge of them on that lake. So working along, so you're casting out the side of the boat and then retrieving. And what that means is that you get the belly in the fly line.
Yeah.
And you're not trying to fight to catch up with the fly, if you know what I mean. when you're influenced by the wind. But the funny thing about that lake, right, and part of it is that some of those trout are just, there's no real fishing pressure on them, so they're relatively eager. But the funny thing about it is, some of the really good days where we've got a few fish have been on a flat can, when the small trout are up dimpling on the surface and the bigger guys are below taking them off. So that's kind of in contrast to what I've experienced on the river, because I often find on the river that the best days are the really rough days, overcast or lashing rain or windy, whereas those bigger guys on there, it seemed to be that they were up taking the small trout. Well, they were copping them up when we caught them anyway, so that was the kind of theory.
48, my Corrib record, my story. And all of this time, your stomach is in knots with the excitement and the adrenaline, because you really don't want this fish to come off. And I did, as I said previously, I hooked the fish 2 years before, and it was a record-sized fish and he came off. And I'd thought to myself, I don't want to go through that again. If this fish was going to come off, I was going to just step over the side. So anyway, I played this fish, and it looked like now, it was just over the hour, she was ready for the net. So, again, if you can imagine now, you're in the boat, the fish is behind you, you're facing the wind, and you're drifting away from the fish, which is quite difficult. And then you're down in a trough and up. So I had my big net out, had it over the side, and she came to the surface on her side, and she would just come into the net. And as she came into the net, the trough, the way the wind was, blew the boat up into the crest of the wave, and the fish slipped out and then back in. You can imagine what I felt. The fish was half in the net, and she just slid back in. And at this point, I'm thinking, I was so lucky, because I could see the bait and the hooks was inside the mouth. If it had been outside on the jaws, as she slid out at the edge of the net, a good chance the hooks would have been stuck in the net, and then inevitably would happen. She would have come off. Another 10 minutes passed now. And if you can imagine, I know the size of the fish now. I've seen the size of the fish, and I still haven't got it in. So, like I said, about another 10 minutes passed now, and she came up to the surface again. I slipped my net under this time, clean as a whistle, lifted the net, and that was it. But I didn't just lift her in straight away. I was so shattered, mentally as well as physically. Hour and a quarter that fish would be on. So I held the net at the end of the gunnels for 2 minutes. It seemed like a lifetime. Just looked over the side, see the fish there. Lift it then. One heave into the boat. And I could see then that this was a record. 18. Colin Follen.
I was gillying on Ballynahinch for the first week in July for a fella called Don Carroll. He was Carroll's cigarette. I was Don's gilly, and always the first 7 days in July was year on, year off. That was always with Don. And sometimes he'd have a guest with him for the week. And this time he had a guest, a fella from Belgium, an outlet from Belgium. So anyway, 3 days into the fishing, we were fishing Beat 1 in Ballynahinch, and we were fishing on the far bank, and on the near bank there's all rushes and reeds, and he hooked a fish about 5 or 6 pound, and the fish kept, trying to run into the rushes on him, and I kept saying to him, I said, don't let him in there. I said, pull him out of it, pull him out. And he wasn't stopping the fish at all. And
was it a trout?
The fish went, no, it was a grilled salmon. Yeah. The fish went straight into the reeds anyway. I says, you fucking idiot. I says, I told you not to let him into the reeds. And sure, the fly, we lost the fly as well, which kind of really annoyed me because I only had the one of it and it was working very well that week. So I had to snap the line anyway and got it back. So I finished up with them on the Friday, and I knew they were going to dinner in Roundstone, into O'Dowd's restaurant in Roundstone. You were actually in there with me one time, weren't you?
I remember, yeah.
Chowder.
We had a liquid lunch as well, I think.
Liquid lunch. Do you see how I stopped? We had chowder and... So what happened was I drove back to Galway after doing 7 days work with them, and I was emptying out my car, and lo and behold, Yamano's fishing bag was in the boot of my car, the Belgian fella.
Yeah.
Like, you want to see all the hardy reels he had and boxes of fully dressed salmon flies and this, that and the other. Like, this was 50 grand worth of stuff now in his bag, like a big bag. So I said to myself, I can't be responsible for shipping this back to Belgium. Like, I hardly even knew his name and stuff. So
you'd forgot it.
Forgot it. Yeah, it was in my car. I jumped back in the car anyway, and I drove back out to Roundstone, which is about an hour and a half from Galway. And I went into the restaurant, and I brought in the bag, and there he was with Don, and there was two other fellas, two kind of big heavies. And I said to myself, right, this makes sense now, because I had seen them two big fellas, daily for the last week and stuff like that. You know what I mean? They were his bodyguards, right? So Don says to me, you'll stay for dinner and you can stay in my house. That's brilliant gesture what you're after doing there. And I said, well, thank you very much. I'll enjoy that. And he says, Colin, I'll formally introduce you to the King of Belgium. He says, right, Albert, the King of Belgium. And I went, oh, hello. How do I refer to you? I says to him, and he says, well, most people will call me Your Majesty. He says, but I loved it when you called me a feckin' Egypt. So I'm not used to being called a feckin' Egypt, he says. Right, so I says, I've just called the King of Belgium a feckin' Egypt. So that was good, yeah.
32, Jimmy Terrell. Come to that time, I'm going to ask you a question, which I ask everyone. And you probably know what the question is going to be. Where would you want to be to make your last cast?
On the River Gowl, it's paradise. And if you're ever over here, I'll take you and you'll see why. It's a small river, and if you were out there on a summer's evening, you were in a different world, because there's virtually nothing, only a farmhouse here or there every few miles, and it's paradise. Just you, the river, and hopefully a hatch of flies on it. And there's nothing better. I've had some of my nicest evenings on it. You could actually sit there for hours on a summer's evening, just looking at fish rising. There's nothing nicer, actually. Just somewhere. There's actually, if you're ever over, I'll take you and show you. There's even there's a weir in a certain part of it. There's no houses near this. There's a weir and there's a graveyard. And I often said to myself, we'd love to be buried there. The graveyard is probably 200 yards off the river, in the middle of nowhere. A house at the graveyard. It's just a paradise, honestly, paradise. And I love it. It's probably the nicest place that I've ever had to fish in my life. Like, the fishing is so good in it, and nobody fishes it. You kind of have it all to yourself. But you wouldn't see a footprint. To me, that's nice. And over the years, I've learned different laneways to go down through meeting farmers who don't even fish. And if the fishing is good, take a fish home and drop it off on the doorstep on the way home, and you're always welcome back. Little laneways where there's, you've no access, only those laneways. You learn that they're there over the years. Nobody else would know that. And sometimes you can drive in and park right on the edge of the river. It's just laneways, the farmer access lanes for fields, farmers. That's how I learned all that river. You'd nearly have it to yourself. But again, if the fishing is good, keep a fish, drop it on his doorstep on the way home, and you'll always be welcome back. You'd be welcome if you didn't drop it anyway, but that to me is home from home. Nothing nicer.
Awesome. Well, hopefully we will meet up this year.
Please God, everything will be calmer down then towards the summer. And if you're over, just give me a call. We'll look after you.
I will do. I thoroughly enjoyed our chat, and hope to see you this year.
I loved it. Thanks very much. Yeah.
If you've enjoyed this podcast and want to listen to the full episodes, consider becoming a patron. Well, you'll get over 80 past episodes and weekly podcasts, plus photography and exclusive content. To join, visit patreon.com/Casting with Kelly Jones, or see the link on my website, castingwithkellyjones.com. Well, that's all for now. Tight lines and don't strike too soon.